Yeah, good morning. Before I start on what I wanted to discuss, one thing, a different thing. Recently there has a new discussion been started on voting machines, and the Dutch government has been working to reintroduce them. And I've been to a committee where they were thinking about security measures to make a totally secure system, which was very interesting. And one of the things they are now thinking of is giving people that come to vote in the Netherlands a key card that will unlock the machine. And with the machine you can then select the party you want to vote and the person you want to vote for. That will print out a form, and that form will be thrown in the bin, and that bin will be optically be scanned. And of course this is secure because all the source code is being checked by common criteria, level 4 or level 6, depends on the part of the system it is about. So they cherry pick a little bit from both standards, which is, I think, interesting. But what's far more interesting is that at a certain point they had to explain the system to me 4 times before I understood it. So now I'm thinking about how am I going to convince my 84-year-old mother that this is a system she still understands, that is secure. So that was pretty interesting. I'm not sure what they are going to do with the feedback that we gave them, because that was anything but flattering. As you can imagine, especially the printing system, there were people that thought of, for instance, you can not show a political party, then as somebody looks again or scrolls back, all of a sudden the party is there. Those type of attacks would definitely enable, to steal votes. And it really depends on people checking the ballot and really checking that they, know up front what to vote, because else it doesn't work. I don't know if you've ever been in the Netherlands and seen sometimes the flyer that we get. Sometimes in the voting booth I'm still einy, miny, mo selecting what party to vote for. And that makes it very interesting. So, and going on with this process, what intrigues me a lot is the religious thrive to make this a digital process. And I haven't really figured out what is so important. They say, like, okay, we can count the votes quicker, but now on April 6th we've got a referendum, and with quicker counting of the vote, that means less polling stations, because they have, at certain cities, they've closed down more than 60% of all polling stations because it's so easy to count the votes now for the referendum. So this is pretty interesting what that will mean. But it also is very interesting that people think that when you push a machine and a button, that all of a sudden that means that your whole system is basically very democratic. And it seems to be that the discussion that Rob Groengrijp started years ago is being redone over and over again. So he jokingly said, by the way, I wonder how many seats in parliament a political party would get that has a name like, I don't trust this voting machine. Having said that, I just want to leave that with you, and maybe if you have got ideas on why this happens, that I would be very interested in it. I'm working on a new book, and that was what my talk would be about. And I would like to be also to make it a discussion, because I'm still searching for answers that I in many cases don't have. And my next book will be all about the information society and what we can do to fix broken things, or what we can do to prevent things from happening that we generally do not like. And to explain it a little bit, let me explain how society has changed a little bit. What used to be the case is that you have a government and that's on top of the people, and we would, bow our heads and, live to what the government says. Well, this is how I see the government nowadays. This is the Department of Health, and this is the government seated in bulletproof glass, afraid for the citizens to come by. And then you have to turn in your ID card. And this is what basically my government is, you know, somebody that's very hard to reach and very difficult to talk to. Our society works different. This is a tweet that was used last year, or was placed online last year in October, when we had discussions on where to put refugees. And there was this city called Oranje, and they already accepted 700 refugees, and that was a limit. And they agreed on with the government. And what happened during the meeting with the Secretary of Justice, the Secretary of Justice all of a sudden said, yes, we had an agreement, but we don't stick to it. That deal is off the table now, we're going to place 1,400 people. Now you have to understand, this village has approximately 150 inhabitants. And then something very interesting happened, because when this tweet appeared, people got angry. And they blocked the Secretary of Justice his car, and this has been, you know, portrayed in the media a lot. A woman that tried to stop the car, fell over it and broke her arm. And the thing was, everybody thought that was incredibly funny, because these xenophobe people respond so ridiculously. And what I noticed was, how can we call somebody xenophobe if you said yes to 5 times the number of your own citizens? What other city in the Netherlands has made similar choices? And if we say that, is this really a signal of I'm being xenophobe, or is this a signal of I had a deal with my government, and the government all of a sudden says, let's change the deal without discussing it? And of course, because of technology, we live in a horizontal society. If there's one example, it's the hacker community. We are extremely horizontal. And we want to be involved, and we want to intervene with stuff. And so are these people, but they're not as smart always as we are, in the sense that we know what to do, and often, by the way, we don't. But and they respond far more basic, but the signal is quite the same. Now, on a positive, you might remember this, the lockdown in Brussels a couple of months ago, and they were so afraid that when a police action took place, it would be live broadcasted, so that the terrorists that would be watching the television would see that they were being arrested at the same point. So what Belgium started to do were a lot of tweets about cats and guns, and you know, to create a denial of service on people that might be watching on the lockdown. So you got all sorts of funny cat things. And the interesting part of this whole story is that by doing that, all of a sudden people had a place. So the government deals differently, and the people deal differently with the government in Belgium than we Dutch do. I thought that was very interesting. And at the end, I forgot to put that in, the police tweeted a photo of cat food, and thanks for being such good citizens, here's some cat food for you. Which is funny, and maybe it's just one person with a bright moment, but it shows a very horizontal approach. And again, after the attacks a couple of weeks ago, all of a sudden there was this hashtag, I want to help. Again, very, very horizontal. In the Netherlands, we see something similar happen, and the referendum was started basically by citizens of a weblog. But something happened before. A couple of, when was it, 2 years ago, there was this European election for Parliament, and we always go voting on a Wednesday. I don't know why, but we do. The rest of Europe does it on a Sunday, so what happened, we would go voting before the rest of Europe, and then we were to keep the result of the elections silent. And this is strange, because I started with the voting machines. It all is about it's about transparency. You know, if the loser understands that he really lost, he accepts the results. You know, if you won, it's quite easy to understand that you won and to accept that. But if you lose, you want to be convinced. So the most stupid thing you can do is not being transparent about the elections. And now what had Europe thought of is that we were not allowed to see the results until the Sunday. And there was this one weblog, actually one guy, Bart Nijman, and he at a certain point said, well, that's kind of stupid. And we should, you know, get people on the street that start to monitor the elections. And what you are allowed to do in the Netherlands is during elections, when the votes are being counted, you are allowed to be in the room to verify that. So what they did, they had people all over the nation, more than 1,200, that were watching the results. And they were phoning them in or sending them by mail. And using statistics, they were able to give a very close prediction. And you see sometimes 4 or 3 seats, 3 or 4 seats. That seems to be very stupid, but this is normally what happens with the elections. You always have 1 seat and you don't really know where it will end. You know, there are some minor margins. So they had the closest projection ever made. Again, this is very horizontal. So then we got this new law to have a referendum, and they did the same trick by playing horizontal. So they started to try and get 300,000 autographs. And now the funny thing is, in the Netherlands, the law says you have to hand them in by paper. And you've got 2 types of signatures in the Netherlands. We call it a wet signature, when you have really the signature made with a pen on a piece of paper. And we've got a dry signature, which means it's a digital, but it's still your autograph, but it's digitized. And they forgot to put that in the law. So what they did, they had somebody making open source software to have an app and sign it and have a digitized autograph. Because the law only stated that you have to deliver it on paper. So they collected the autograph, more than 450,000 ultimately, and with wet autographs that would have been very hard. And of the 450, they printed it all out, put it in a truck, delivered it to the commission, and that commission would scan it in, and then digitally make it's stupid, but digitally verify the results. The stupid thing is, we've got a digital autograph, by the way, called Digitale, so you could have done it fully automated, and then you would have known it within a day, but it was kind of complex. They spent only 60,000 euros on the whole project, where a part was raised by crowdfunding, and the printing exercise costed 16,000 euros. But now the cool thing, and this is, I think, a hacker part of being horizontal, they used open source software for getting the autographs. And there have already been several action groups that say, like, okay, if this is going to be law, or going to be mandated by Europe, we want to have a referendum, and we've got the software to do it. And they had all sorts of people that helped, over 1,200 again. But you saw a lot of people being involved. So you have the whole swarm of people that think that something is relevant, that apparently happens. Now, this is the point where I want to start a discussion. This is the positive side of a horizontal society, in my opinion. We can be a group and do something together, etc. But there's also I don't know if it's negative, but it's complex, a horizontal part of our economy. Of course, we all know apps like Uber, where you can, of course, arrange your ride and throw basically unnecessary layers out. But that mechanism goes a bit further. To give you an example, we're all thinking about self-driving cars. What about a self-driving truck or a self-driving bus or self-driving, you name it? Why would I still need a train? Why would I, by the way, still need a bus if you can have a car that can be far more precise? And why would I need a taxi driver or train conductor or a bus driver or you name it? Why would I need cleaners when I can maybe make my house in a couple of years or an office in such a way that it is so standardized that a cleaning robot can do most of the work? And somebody only needs to follow up on that to do the final details. So a lot of jobs seem to be going lost where there is hardly little or no, or where there's little or no replacement. The interesting part is you see in some industries you see this happening already, and I meet people that say like, yeah, there is no solution. I meet people that say like, oh yeah, but there will be different jobs that will come back for that. And I always keep asking, okay, and what do they look like, these jobs? And there is no answer to that. I don't say it's necessarily bad, because I think it's a stupid system to have an economy based on the hours that you sit in an office, do fun projects in order to survive the time. To keep economy going, that's kind of a strange thing. But what are solutions to this? Because people do need some type of certainty, and to connect the first issue that I mentioned with the city of Oranje and the whole discussion about refugees. I hear two types of people. People that say like, I hate foreigners. Okay, they're jerks. That's one. The second one is, I'm afraid they're going to take away my job. If you read media, if you see television, this is what you hear a lot of times. I don't think they are responding to the right issue, but I do see that apparently this fear is there. If you look at statistics, 70% of all Dutchmen is afraid that in a couple of years' time their lifestyle cannot be sustained anymore. 70%. So, how do we fix that? Can we fix that? And I give you one positive thing. If you have like craftsman's work, that's, by the way, those jobs are adding. But all other sorts of things aren't. But should we fix it? Can we fix it? What are your opinions on that? Anybody? Produce less children, yeah. So the Chinese were right after all.
On the horizontal stuff, one of the things you might be forgetting is that on top of the horizontal layer that we can observe, there's a very deep nested industrial base of your energy, of your food, of your raw materials, which is extremely centralized and very much in the control of very, very few people. So as much as the horizontal seems very interesting and an interesting possibility, do not underestimate the bottom of the iceberg, where, just look around, every single raw material you see here, it has been owned by maybe 5 companies in the world. So it's nowhere as horizontal as it might appear. Right, just the basics.
Is that good news, or is
well, that we can talk about it. I don't think it is, but given the energy, material, and capital resources required to operate an efficient steel mill, you're not likely to have a share economy on steel, whereas that is by far still the largest product by weight and by value in the world. So what I'm saying is that don't be fooled by the apparent horizontal openness, because it is just a thin. It's
layer.
drifting on a layer of very consolidated, centralized material economy.
Anybody disagrees, or? So I'm alarmed for nothing?
I'm not saying it's an alarm thing. It is a matter of just keeping perspective and scale, right? That's all. No, for example, there is, I'm sort of involved in the circular economy stuff, and people are like, oh, circular economy is so great. Why? Because Stokke now has a pushchair that you can recycle. Well, that's awesome, but what the fuck? Right? That's 0.0000001% of the global economy. The rest is just linear extraction, production, dumping. And before, you know what I mean? So it's
yeah,
people,
but don't you think that that part is ending? You know, we're also looking at new forms of energy.
True, but then look at who does most. I mean, this is not an opinion really. It's sort of numbers, right? I can show you the numbers.
That's what I'm after.
But also things like, you know, solar. That's all wonderfully distributed, except it's again in the hand of a few companies.
Anybody?
So I cannot build up any on that, on the previous remark. That's not where my expertise is. But I always heard that, oh no, my job is going. That will happen. So for a lot of people, and I'm in my job to automate myself away. In the end. So the point is not having a job. The point is being able to live a decent human life. And that doesn't require that much in the end. It doesn't. It just requires food, shelter, and the basic necessity, and Wi-Fi. So, so if you have that, I would be happy. And I don't see how that in itself should be that hard.
I agree, but that still means a mental shift, and that means that a change for the powers that be, because they've invested on a economy that works a little bit different. You know, there's an option, by the way, not to do it, but then you will have rioting people in the streets, which we haven't seen that much in the Netherlands yet, but in a lot of other countries we have. You know, in the southern part of Europe, it's a weekly occupation, by the way. It's, by the way, anybody, I'm talking English, but is there anybody who doesn't understand Dutch? Dat kunnen we dus. Oh, you don't. Okay. We have to wait to Calvinistic for that, which, by the way, is a large part of the book, because people always say that technology evolves actually very slow, and compared to Calvinism and the things that did to the Catholic Church and the slow response to that, technology is moving at a lightning speed. But
I think eventually the government will tax productivity by robots. What do you think?
Probably the government will tax anything they can. Probably, so yeah. That would be an interesting, because then you would have something like a base income. Is that what you're?
That was not where I was going, but
okay. Because that would also, you know, solve part of the issue. But I think for the powers that be, that would be. The powers that be will give it a thumbs down.
So my cleaning robot will not be taxed at the moment.
30. Well, actually, that is the logic. If there's less work to do, then we all need less to work. That is also very positive indeed. I can sail a little bit more with my boat. Mark is getting a lot of exercise this morning.
I heard when there was the Industrial Revolution, one of the pioneers said, oh, when we're going to mass produce food and everything, then people won't have to work as much. People can work 3 days. But that was early 1900s, that's 100 years ago.
And a lot of people lost their jobs, actually.
A lot of people lost their jobs. You don't see people shoveling poo from horses anymore. You don't see people walking around with big reels of cotton anymore. Those jobs have gone, but a lot of other jobs have come in the place. But in this revolution there is no such jobs that can happen.
Yeah, but oh, by the way, I'm of the opinion that we haven't lived the revolution just yet. For instance, we still live in the industrial times. For instance, measuring productivity by hours is typically something that that is very industrial.
Yeah, but the point is, the jobs you have now are basically all the new jobs are all based on creativity. Marketeers, designers, that sort of stuff. There isn't enough place for all jobs to be creative. That doesn't work.
And even that will be automated.
Yeah.
I do want to say, don't forget that there is a very strong bias in this room, right? So just keep that in mind, that we are very much digital. This is the world we live in. We're exceptionally rich compared to the vast majority of the human race. And which means that it colors our perception, which I'm not disagreeing with you, but then think about, you say nobody's carrying bales of cotton. Oh yes, they are, just not in Europe, right? And you say, so one of the things that we're experiencing is various layers of technology changing at different speeds, right? The dominant steel production process used throughout the globe has been invented about 100 years ago, hasn't changed yet. On the other extreme, Uber, businesses, everything that floats on digital can move very quickly, and it does move very quickly. But you have to understand that there is this layering of things that are dragging on. And there are bits of infrastructure in London for drinking water that is hollowed out trees, carrying drinking water for London. And it's still there. It's been there for 150 years. There is bits of electricity infrastructure in the Netherlands that are 100, 110 years old. Right? And they're still there. They will be there for a while. So as much as we see the things going very quickly and adapting, there is a very thick physical and institutional layer that's very slow. And that's one of the problems that it's causing. Some things are fast, but some are incredibly, incredibly slow. And that causes tension, and you can see that.
Good point, and but this is the reason why I'm having this discussion here and with this group. Maybe interesting to add, also in the Netherlands, we've got old folks that buy stuff online, do all their banking online, and of that group, 72% is afraid that if the Dutch government is going to digitize, that they will lose track. That's actually very interesting. So I'm not talking about the 1.2 million people that do not have even internet of the older people. I'm talking about a group that actually adapts pretty well. So yeah.
Indeed, all this is for a lot of people just the digitizing of everything just goes too fast. If you one of the main parts of the jobs that are going to disappear in the next 20 years, I think, is truck drivers. Basically, what they do is they drive a truck from A to B, and we've already seen that autonomous cars can do that. So a lot of that sort of jobs will disappear in the next 15, 20 years. And as an economy, there is no place for those people anymore.
Yeah, a friend of mine is a taxi driver, and he just bought a new taxi, a nice car. And I said, well, congratulations, it's your last. Yeah?
So, tracking back a little, with the Industrial Revolution remark, when food should be automatically grown and such, if that's there's a lot of people and a lot will be automated, so we will have a 50 to 70% unemployment rate, so we have to rethink employment at all. Maybe that's something we might get rid of. But yeah, I cannot.
Well, the whole term employment is something, of course, that is related to the whole industrial revolution.
Yeah, you see the shift to network economy and small businesses, one people businesses a lot, and some people in this room have a job where previously it took 200 or 500 people to run, and it's now one guy.
Who is self-employed in this room, by the way? Oh. That's not that much, actually. Yeah? Who doesn't want to say it?
So can we now just automate food production and such, so we do not have to worry about people starving if they don't have a job or something like that?
We realize that about 40% of world's food is wasted, right?
We should waste more.
No, there is plenty of food. This is not properly true.
So
Sorry?
The basic income discussion?
This is partially the base income discussion. It's not really that what I'm after, or I'm not having a political goal here, but it's something that pops up every now and then if you think about this, yeah.
Okay, just respond maybe to add one more thing. One of the dominant social system theories, this notion of autopoiesis, states that human society organizes itself in a way to remove individual choice, right? Because choice is difficult. It's a lot of work. So we organize ourselves into systems that make things predictable, like governments, like religions, like jobs, and family tracks you. You're born, you go to school, you get a wife, you get 2.4 kids, you get employed, that kind of stuff. And a lot of that happens. So a lot of the horizontal economy kind of sharing flat stuff is at great tensions with the basic human need for predictability and stability and structure. That's why we invented governments. And that tension is increasing because we now can spread information faster horizontally, but it is against what we secretly all crave. And that's why we have
But we seem to be very adaptable, because if you see the level of information that we can process, we don't have a newsbringer once every month who will tell what happens in the villages around us.
No, but I do have the 10 guys I follow on Twitter who I decide that are my information source. So I'm just saying that there is a tension between the need and the structure that provides that need, and so we're still, you just asked how many people are self-employed. Very few. Why? Well, because it's difficult, right? It's uncertain. It has all sorts of things, whereas having an employer is nicely predictable. Well, at least I'm talking in general here. So again, there is that. So that's always a tension of how free can you be an individual, really? And we need these structures. I mean, we have the violence monopoly given to the government for a reason, because we don't want that stuff. It should be there, and that's when countries. That's why terrorism is so dangerous, because suddenly the violence monopoly is taken away from the government and is randomly put on the street. So, and that's why we rebel, because hey, you're not doing your job, because you need to protect me, because I don't want to think about this stuff.
Yeah, but if you want predictability, then on the violence, no discussion there. But if you look at statistics and how many people get killed in terrorism compared to the people that get killed
on nonsense, clearly. But
on cancer, we don't have a national cancer coordinator.
Right, but that's a notion of control, right? I mean, I also drove here, and that's the perceived control, which makes me feel comfortable, whereas a terrorist is not something I can control. And whenever you lose the notion of perceived control, you get into trouble.
Fair enough. Good point. Yeah. No other thoughts on the new economy or on changes in economy, or that amazes me. Oh.
I'm a bit confused. There are a lot of things like taxi drivers that can be automated because the infrastructure is pretty standardized, but there are a lot of systems that still aren't standardized, like building roads, a lot of old infrastructure that is a composition of a lot of different systems. They aren't to be automated that easy. Is this really what time scale would a horizontal economy be there? Is this something that I need to worry about in a year, 10 years, 100 years?
Well, this is an interesting thing, because there's this research done by Clayton Christensen, the innovator's dilemma. And one thing is that if you try to predict this, you're at least more than 200% wrong. So there are many examples of that. So it's very hard to predict the pace of how technology will go. For instance, you don't know the sequential things of technologies being available. You know, what will be really ready to use quicker, big data or artificial intelligence, and you don't know how that will interact. So that's the big surprise there. So that's very hard to say. You say like roads are very difficult to build. That really depends. You know, I'm building a house now, and if you see how that goes and how that would go like 30 or 40 years ago, in 1 week time the full structure is there now all of a sudden. So it can be standardized, and a lot of things are standardized, but yeah, not all of it.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. The new things are all standardized, and there's a new standard every few months.
Yeah, there's so many to choose from.
And there is this whole history on things that are still require some creativity to solve.
Yeah,
and even low level into creativity, like how to fix the stones in the street if there's an unexpected curve or something.
And that's something what still amazes me, that you could think of putting stones in the street is something you could do with the mall, and just put there, and then and of course, I know that sometimes that happens, but in Amsterdam recently I saw somebody still doing that with their hand. Maybe it was a punishment for something, but
treadmill-like device. They put the stones on a bed, and the tractor slowly drives forward, and the stones get layered down. But you need a certain width for the road to do that. And Amsterdam, especially the old part.
Rotterdam would be better for that.
Yeah, because most of it got bombed out.
We should be thankful to the Germans for that. Yeah. But that's. I think, by the way, it's a joke, but on the other hand, it's quite kind of serious actually. That of course restructuring apparently did help for those type of processes. Oh, loads of.
A couple of weeks ago, I was at a bank, and the person next to me said, I'm very happy and I don't have a job. He was 31, and the person from the bank asked, I see you don't have a job. Is there a reason? And the guy said, yeah, I'm 31 now. Since I'm 18, I'm not working anymore. I'm totally happy with the money I get from the government, and I can live happily ever after. So that's also the case.
Of course, and actually I started this also with the notion that working less is not necessarily a bad thing. The only thing is, of course, there's an economy underneath it, and that still needs to function in order to have people get food. And
happy with the Weiskamp money he got and the money he earned with doing illegal stuff. So he was totally fine.
It's a different way of thinking, but it's
And if everybody does it that way, it won't work.
This is ultimately why.
Because other people work.
This is ultimately why we buy a ticket in the staatsloterij, in the state lottery.
So I have three things I want to talk about. One, new technology creates new technology. You know, we invented cars, and then we got the petrol industry going on, and then we get plastics, and then things going. But these type of new jobs create new jobs. It's a never-ending story. Most people who are in the room could not have had the current job 100 years ago. So I think that this whole notion that the jobs are automated away is not the right way of thinking about it. There will be a new generation of people who will have jobs who are different than we have now. But there will be new jobs every single time.
I didn't say that they were like totally disappearing, but there seems to be a reduction going on.
I don't see that. We have extremely low, unemployment. So, if somebody finds his job unappealing and he thinks his job is worthless, then that is a thing of all times. People 200 years ago also had jobs where the people, if you would ask them at the time, what do you think about your job? They said, well, I do not like to do it, but I do it because I need food on the table. So it's a privileged way of thinking that most of the people in this room have a job that they actually like. It's not a mandatory thing that you have to like your job. I'm sorry, but it is like that. Another thing I want to talk is mindset. The people in this room have a really creative mindset. We're thinking about the future every single day. I myself, I'm also thinking that my current lease car will probably, I would prefer it to be the last car that I have to drive myself. It's my fantasy. It's also the thing that I'm working to. And everybody in this room is doing that because we are creative people in our heads. But I think if you go to other people who have a non-hacker mentality, they are afraid of these type of changes. Mm-hmm. They don't embrace it. Uber is not going to be used in Schubbekutteveen. It's going to be used in Amsterdam Central City because the people have money to actually spend on Uber, and they don't want to have the effort of walking to the bike and take the bike. But Amsterdam is a great city where you can bike from back to forth. Why is a taxi actually working in Amsterdam? That's because of the economics. But in Schubbekutteveen, there's no economics that way, and there's no Uber. So it's the mindset that makes it so different. Also with and the third thing I want to talk about is the poverty line. 50 years ago, if you would have bought a car that had, let's say, automatic steering and all kinds of other fancy options, it would have cost like 60, 70,000 euros. Nowadays, all these options are in cars that are like 30,000 euros or less. So what's happening is that is something you get from free from the auto drive industry, of the automobile industry. That is because they know you can afford cars of 60,000 euros anymore. There are not enough people to actually make this going. So they bring those options down to the mass rapidly because they know otherwise they don't sell cars anymore. It's not just a way that you are competing with each other, but you're all competing with how people are getting less and less money. And again, in this room we have a kind of people that earn so much money that they actually can do whatever they want. But the normal guy on the street who has a normal teaching job doesn't have the money anymore compared to 40 years ago. So a lot of things about the horizontal economy are also forced. You need to borrow stuff from each other. You need to go to a system where you cooperate, and also, and that's my last thing I will say, and then I will, give it to somebody else who can reply on all the things that I'm saying, is that families in Holland are destroyed. We don't live next to our family anymore. We don't like family ties anymore. That's because we have enough money to actually do whatever we want, whenever we want. But if you go 50 years ago, it would be normal that you would take care of your grandpa and your grandma. They would live in your house even probably after a certain age.
You put a lot on the table.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to put one more thing on the table? In your analysis, is the economic system as we have it nowadays still viable in like 50 years' time?
Yes, of course. Because we will change it slowly but gradually to something that is different. You don't have, if you look to the economy in this room, or you look at the economy over all the world, that's a different type of thing. Again, people in this room have a really creative mindset. They wish the future to be different. They wish the economy to be different. It's not happening because it's not needed. Bitcoin is used by how many percent of the global economy and people in there? Only such a tiny small fraction. Black market is bigger than Bitcoin. And that's for a reason. Cash money will not that easily go away. The moment they take away our cash, we will find something that is a replacement of cash instantly. Gold. I don't know what it is, but it will be there. So all these things that we think about in this room is also, we enjoy thinking about these things. It makes us happy to be such a free thinkers. But if you look at the grand scale, it really doesn't matter that much.
Can I just react to that? Thanks for that comment on wealth. We are indeed ridiculously wealthier than our ancestors. One of the important things in what you mentioned is that our economic system, specifically in the Netherlands, taxes labor more than it taxes energy materials. And the direct consequence of that is that we're moving into more gadgets, more machines, more things. You know, it's too expensive to have a guy selling you tickets on a train, so you have a vending machine. And one of the fundamental broken things is that we should stop taxing labor. Because suddenly, then it's not a problem to have a guy doing nice, relaxed jobs that are not expensive anymore. And one of the problems that, because you said the economy in its current state will be around for 50 years, I think we're completely boned. I mean, just the environmental impacts are going to be so bad, again, because we're not taxing energy use, we're not taxing resource use, we're taxing labor. Thus, we're forcing the whole global system into more energy use and more material use. Right? I mean, every time you eat a kilo of bread, you have eaten about 1.5 kilos of diesel. Right? Every single time. You've eaten about 10 to 20 liters of water. And, you know, it just goes downhill from there. And that's, again, because it's so much cheaper to just get a big-ass tractor than 20 guys digging the field. So, as long as you cannot fix that, we are completely fucked in terms of a global economy.
Very interesting.
Another thing is what I see around in the IT sector is that we work too much, actually. If I'm looking at myself, I'm working like 40 or 50 hours a week. I think an average, well, most of us are guys working like that as well, which disables a couple of other things. One is a normal, healthy family planning. And secondly, we are occupying more or less 2 or 3 jobs. Because we can downshift. We are rich enough to downshift and live a more healthier life, I think, and spread our labor with 3 people. So if we work like 20 or 30 hours, we enable another one or another person to have another job. No?
Agree.
But there needs to be also a mentality switch of our employers, because as soon as you go into an IT department and say like, you know, I want to work for you, but I've got daddy days, I want to work 3 days a week because I got a beautiful daughter, then the employer says like, ha ha ha, bye bye. And that's also, I think, the reason why we are, well, you said it as well, we're a very homogeneous culture here. We don't see a lot of females as well, and we are, well, look around. It kind of sucks, right?
Wouldn't you agree that the current situation is only sustainable because we have some kind of modern slavery around in China and India that supports our system? That's the only reason why we can do what we do here with our wealth and the gadgets we want. And that's why we don't have 20 people working on something, because we outsource it to other countries in a form of slavery. And that's why this whole system is working, I think.
No, very much. Look at the numbers, right? Europe and US together, 600 million people. There's almost 7 billion of us on the planet, right? And all the wealth, I mean, 80% of the world's wealth fits in a single freaking box. Right? There's 50 people that own 80% of the world's wealth. That means that, and we are somewhere in that top 1%. So that means that it's so massively skewed. And you should never ever forget that this is so much the top of society of the world. Which means that you don't see a vast number of things that are really very well.
That's also our way of being. That's also our way of being luxury thinkers. You know, we have the luxury of agreeing that slavery is bad. You know.
Yes,
So
you have a cheap Chinese iPhone. I mean,
yes, Your laptop is also I'm not complaining there, but the thing is, we have the luxury of being the free thinkers, and I'm going to make a statement. I'm not behind, but is it that bad that there are people in China who live in poor conditions? Because if we would not have done something, they would have been more poor. You know, it's one of those difficult things that you feel you're not saying the right thing, but you know. There is a way going up there. The people are going to civilization.
Let me trade in arms because also somebody else will do it.
And the other thing is, those people want it themselves as well. They started helping us. No,
they shouldn't have taken a job.
I said as well. That's it's an important thing. But because they want iPhones as well. So it's a thing where everybody wants to have a certain life standard, and that makes it difficult.
So I hear like these jobs, and really we have great living standards here. So there's this argument that we all should have a job, and then there are some examples of really shitty jobs. Like putting stones, walking around with bales of cotton, things that I'm asking myself as a really luxury thinker, like, if there's another way, does the person still want to do that if it doesn't bring food on the table? And the answer is obviously no. So, yeah. We should not go for the job economy just to get shitty jobs to get some of this economy going. That's so more luxury thinking.
But Aldous didn't say that it was his opinion necessarily.
Yeah, no, but that's yeah. Yeah, of course. But so I'm not in favor of. I watched an episode of Penn and Teller, and they made some. There was an argument for a waste processing plant, and it was accepted because it creates more jobs in the neighborhood, and those were the most worthless jobs you could ever imagine. That's even worse than being unemployed and having nothing. So that's not what you should. It's not about having the job. It's about having some means of life, I think.
Thank you. Well, thank you for filling half of my presentation, but you really helped me ahead, because this is, I'm not that much into economics, so it really helps me ahead with, finishing off of this and do some more research, and it really helps. So thank you very much for that. And now at least you know a little bit what I'm working on. Besides the economy, there's a lot of more stuff in there, but this is one of the things that is so difficult to predict, and so difficult, you don't want to say you have to go this direction. On the other hand, you want to show options that there's some light, and I had a couple of eye-openers already. I think the remark about taxation is a very interesting one to do a lot of exploring on. So thank you all very much. Unless I offended somebody or said something wrong, or okay, cheers.